The Montana night sky blazed with an unusual streak of purple light, cutting through the peaceful darkness like a cosmic wound. Sarah Chen stood on her ranch's porch, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips as she watched the object plummet towards Earth. It wasn't a shooting star. It was too big, too close, and definitely too purple. The impact shook the ground minutes later, sending her horses into a frightened frenzy in their stables. Sarah didn't hesitate. 10 years in the military had taught her that unusual situations demanded immediate action. She grabbed her emergency medical kit, flashlight, and the rifle she kept by the door. Better safe than sorry. The crash site wasn't hard to find. A trail of broken pine trees led straight to a smoking crater about half a mile into her property. Sarah's flashlight beam caught something reflecting in the darkness. A sleek, oval pot about the size of a small car, its surface decorated with strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "Hello," she called out, rifle ready but pointed down. "Anyone there?" A soft scraping sound came from behind the pod, followed by something that might have been a whimper. Sarah moved carefully around the wreckage, her boots crunching on scattered debris. What she saw next made her drop both the flashlight and rifle. A figure lay crumpled on the ground. Humanoid, but definitely not human. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to shimmer with faint patterns of light. The alien, because what else could it be, was clearly female, with delicate features that looked almost elfin. But what caught Sarah's attention was the blood seeping from multiple wounds. It wasn't red, but a glowing purple liquid that pulsed with its own light. The alien's eyes opened, all three of them, revealing irises that swirled with colors Sarah had never seen before. The creature reached out with a trembling hand, and suddenly Sarah's mind filled with impressions: fear, pain, desperation, and above all, a plea for help. Sarah's combat medic training kicked in automatically. "I don't know what you are," she said, already kneeling beside the injured alien, "but I'm going to help you. Just stay still." The alien's wounds were unlike anything she'd seen before. The purple blood seemed to be dimming with each passing moment, like a flashlight running out of batteries. Sarah worked quickly, applying pressure bandages where she could, though she had no idea if human medical techniques would help this clearly non-human patient. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the alien's eyes widened in terror. More images flooded Sarah's mind. Massive ships, cruel faces, torture, escape. The message was clear. Whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. "Can you move?" Sarah asked, miming walking with her fingers. The alien nodded weakly. At least that gesture seemed universal. "My truck's not far. We need to get you out of here." As Sarah helped the alien to her feet, she noticed more strange lights in the sky. Bigger, brighter, and moving with purpose. The alien's fear spiked so strongly that Sarah could feel it like a physical wave. Whatever was up there, it meant business. "I'm Sarah," she said, supporting the alien's weight as they moved through the dark forest. "And I promise you're safe with me." The alien made a sound like wind chimes in a breeze, then pressed something into Sarah's hand. A small device that projected a holographic word. "Nix." "Nice to meet you, Nix," Sarah said, managing a smile despite the situation. "Let's get you somewhere safe. I know a doctor who doesn't ask too many questions." As they made their slow way through the woods, Sarah heard the distant sound of larger ships landing. She thought about the comfortable, ordinary life she'd built here after leaving the military. That life had just gotten a lot more complicated, but looking at the injured alien leaning on her shoulder, Sarah knew she'd made the right choice. Some things were more important than keeping your head down. Sometimes, you had to step up and do what's right, even if it meant risking everything. Besides, Sarah thought with a grim smile, she'd been getting a little bored with ranch life anyway. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez was used to late-night emergencies. Living in rural Montana meant he was often the only vet for miles around. But when Sarah Chen's truck pulled up to his clinic at 2 a.m., he knew this wasn't going to be a typical case of a horse with colic or a cow in labor. "Marcus, I need your help," Sarah said as she helped a strange, glowing figure from her truck. "And you need to promise not to freak out." Marcus stood in the doorway of his clinic, his coffee cup slipping from his fingers and shattering on the ground. The figure leaning on Sarah was definitely not human. Its skin rippled with fading patterns of light, and purple blood dripped from several wounds. "Sarah," he managed to say, "that's an alien." "Yes, and she's dying. Are you going to help or not?" 20 minutes later, Nix lay on an examination table while Marcus ran every test he could think of. Sarah had filled him in on the crash landing and the pursuing ships, but right now, his focus was entirely medical. "This is fascinating," he muttered, looking at blood samples under his microscope. "Her blood cells, if you can call them that, they're crystalline structures. They're not just carrying oxygen. They're storing energy like tiny batteries." Nix suddenly activated a small device that projected holographic images into the air. The images showed minerals, crystals, and what looked like energy transfer diagrams. "I think she's trying to tell us what she needs," Sarah said, studying the images. "Look at these crystal structures. They're similar to what you saw in her blood." Marcus snapped his fingers. "My geology collection. I've got mineral samples from all over the state." He rushed to a cabinet and returned with a box of rocks and crystals. "Let's see if any of these match what she's showing us." Nix's three eyes widened at the sight of the minerals. She pointed eagerly at several quartz crystals and something that looked like purple amethyst. When Marcus brought them closer, the patterns of light under her skin brightened slightly. "She's not just showing us pretty rocks," Sarah realized. "These minerals, they're like medicine for her species." Working together, they crushed the crystals into a fine powder and mixed them with purified water. Nix guided them through her own translation device, showing them how her people absorbed minerals through patches of specialized skin. As they applied the mixture to Nix's wounds, the purple glow of her blood gradually strengthened. The patterns of light across her skin became more stable, and her breathing eased. "It's working," Marcus said with relief. "But we're going to need more minerals. A lot more." Sarah was about to respond when headlights swept across the clinic windows. Everyone froze. Through the blinds, they could see several black SUVs pulling up outside. "The back door," Marcus whispered. "Through the storage room. I'll handle whoever this is." Sarah helped Nix up, and they quietly made their way to the back of the clinic. Through the thin walls, they could hear voices at the front door. "Good evening, Doctor," a smooth voice said. "We're with the United States government. We're investigating reports of unusual atmospheric phenomena in this area." At 2 a.m., Marcus's voice was perfectly confused. "Well, I've been treating a sick horse all night. Haven't seen anything unusual, except maybe some shooting stars." Sarah led Nix through the storage room, gathering supplies they might need. She could hear the conversation continuing at the front of the clinic. "Mind if we look around?" the smooth voice asked. "Actually, I do mind," Marcus replied firmly. "This is a private medical facility. You'll need a warrant if you want to search the premises. I have patients' privacy to consider." As Sarah and Nix slipped out the back door into the darkness, Sarah smiled. Marcus was buying them valuable time, and he hadn't hesitated for a moment to help. Sometimes the best allies were the ones who asked the fewest questions. Now they just had to figure out where to go next and what exactly they were dealing with. Because one thing was certain, those weren't government agents at the door. The small town of Pine Creek woke up to find itself invaded by strangers in black suits. They moved through the streets in groups, carrying devices that looked like tablets but hummed and glowed with strange lights. Their story was simple. They were searching for a dangerous criminal who had entered the country illegally. Local Sheriff Tom Hayes didn't buy it for a second. "Mighty strange how none of you have actual badges," he drawled, standing in front of his office as one of the groups approached. "And I don't recall the FBI ever using equipment that glows in the dark." The leader of the group, a tall woman with unnaturally perfect features, smiled without warmth. "We represent a special international task force, Sheriff. Our credentials have been approved at the highest levels." "Well, ain't that something?" Tom replied, chewing thoughtfully on a toothpick. "Still gonna need to see some real paperwork before you start searching people's properties." Meanwhile, Sarah and Nix were hiding in an abandoned mining shaft 5 miles outside of town. Marcus had suggested it. The old mine was rich in quartz deposits, which seemed to help maintain Nix's strength. More importantly, the surrounding rocks appeared to mask her biological signature from the searchers' detection devices. "Your people," Nix spoke through her translation device, which she'd been gradually adjusting to better communicate. "They help us without knowing me." "Why?" Sarah looked up from where she was setting up their portable camp. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because folks around here don't trust anyone who shows up wearing suits and making demands." Their hiding place had become a hub of quiet activity. Local hunters brought supplies using their knowledge of hidden trails. Amateur radio operators monitored strange frequencies the searchers were using. Even the high school science teacher, Mrs. Patel, had snuck them mineral samples from the school's geology lab. But their pursuers were getting closer. Each day, the search pattern tightened around their area. "They will not stop," Nix said, her skin patterns dimming with worry. "The hegemony never stops. They will tear apart your whole world to find me." "Then maybe it's time we learned exactly what they're after," Sarah replied. "You didn't just run away, did you? You found out something they don't want anyone to know." Nix's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Sarah had learned meant deep concern. The alien activated a different function on her device, projecting a series of images into the air. They showed massive ships, laboratories filled with strange equipment, and rows of stasis pods containing various alien species. "Your world is not first," Nix explained. "Hegemony finds worlds, studies them, takes what they want. But humans," her patterns flickered with excitement. "Humans are different. Your minds resist their control. They cannot simply take your people like others. So they planned something worse." Before she could continue, their portable radio crackled. It was Marcus's voice. "Sarah, they're heading your way." Someone talked. "Get out now." Sarah was already packing their essential supplies. "How close?" "Too close," came the reply. "But don't worry. Tom's got a plan to slow them down." On the main road leading to the mining area, Sheriff Hayes had parked 3 police cars across the street. As the convoy of black SUVs approached, he stepped out, looking apologetic. "Real sorry, folks," he called out. "Got a report of some missing hikers. Area's closed while we conduct our search. Safety regulations, you understand." The perfect-featured woman stepped out of the lead vehicle, her face twitching with barely controlled anger. "Sheriff, you are interfering with a matter of national security." "Well now," Tom smiled, "that's mighty interesting. Because I just got off the phone with the actual National Security Council, and they've never heard of your task force." As the confrontation unfolded on the road, Sarah and Nix were already moving through a network of old mining tunnels that connected to neighboring valleys. They weren't alone. Local guides who'd explored these caves since childhood led the way, while others worked to erase their trails. The hunters had the technology, but the humans had something better, a community that protected its own. And somehow, without ever being told the full story, they had decided that Nix was now one of them. Mrs. Patel's high school science lab had become an unlikely command center at midnight. The elderly science teacher moved between tables covered with rocks, electronic equipment, and hastily drawn diagrams, her gray hair escaping from its usual neat bun. The hegemony's detection technology works by tracking specific energy signatures, she explained to the small group gathered around. But everything we've learned from Nix suggests these signatures can be masked or redirected. Sarah watched as the teacher held up a large piece of magnetite. "Our planet's magnetic field already interferes with their equipment. That's why they're having to search area by area instead of just scanning the whole region. And that's why we're going to make it worse for them," Marcus added, grinning as he set down a box of old computer parts. Much worse. Over the past week, they'd discovered that Nex's crystalline biology was similar to certain Earth minerals in unexpected ways. This had given Mrs. Patel an idea, one crazy enough that it just might work. If we can't hide the signature completely, the teacher continued, we'll give them too many signatures to track. The plan was beautifully simple. Using salvaged parts from old radios, phones, and computers, they built small devices that mimicked Nex's energy pattern. These were powered by the same types of crystals that sustained her biology. When activated, each device would create a false signal that the hegemony's equipment would detect as a auxiliary presence. Local ranchers and farmers took the devices, hiding them across miles of countryside. Some were placed in caves, others in abandoned buildings, and many in the natural mineral deposits that dotted the region. The effect was immediate. The next morning, the hegemony search parties scattered in different directions, chasing dozens of false signals. Look at them run around. Sheriff Hayes chuckled, watching through binoculars from his office. Like cats chasing laser pointers. But their advantage didn't last long. By afternoon, one of the hegemony leaders had figured out something was wrong. Their searchers began destroying the decoy devices whenever they found them. They're adapting faster than we expected, Sarah said, watching the alien hunters' methodical progress through town. We need something else. That's when Billy Chen, Sarah's teenage nephew who had been quietly listening to all the planning sessions, spoke up. What about the wolves? Everyone turned to look at him. Billy shrugged. The gray wolves up in the hills. They're territorial, and they're really good at staying hidden. Maybe they could help us move the devices around. The idea seemed ridiculous at first, but Nex's eyes brightened. Through her translator, she explained that her people had a natural affinity with pack animals on many worlds. Working with the local wildlife might actually be possible. It took 3 days of careful work. Mrs. Patel adjusted the devices to emit frequencies that wouldn't disturb the wolves but would still fool the hegemony's detectors. Local wildlife experts helped them approach the wolf packs carefully, using their knowledge of wolf behavior to gain their trust. To everyone's amazement, it worked. The wolves, curious about the strange devices that resonated with frequencies similar to their pack calls, began moving them around their territory. The hegemony hunters found themselves chasing signals that never stayed in one place. Your planet's creatures, Nix observed, watching through a telescope as confused alien hunters searched an empty hillside, while the wolf pack quietly moved away with one of the devices. They are much cleverer than the hegemony believes. That's kind of the theme here, Sarah replied with a smile. They keep underestimating us, all of us. But their victory was short-lived. That evening, larger ships appeared in the sky, sleek, predatory vessels that hung above the town like storm clouds. They're getting desperate, Nix said, her skin patterns showing fear. They will stop pretending to be human soon. We must be ready for what comes next. Sarah looked at their unlikely group of allies. A vet, a science teacher, a sheriff, local ranchers, and even wild wolves, and felt strangely confident. Let them come, she said. We've got a few more tricks they haven't seen yet. The basement of Pine Creek's library had become a makeshift war room. Maps covered the walls, marked with hegemony movements and safe zones. Computer screens showed weather patterns, geological surveys, and strange energy readings from the alien ships above. But most impressive was the group gathered around the central table. Dr. James Watson, a retired physics professor who had driven all night from the state university, pointed to a complex diagram. Earth's magnetic field isn't just interfering with their technology by accident. We've evolved alongside these electromagnetic patterns for millions of years. That's why they want human genetics, Nix added through her translator. Her skin patterns pulsed with urgency as she projected images showing complex DNA structures. Your species adapted to conditions that would drive most sentient beings mad. Sarah leaned forward, studying the projections. You mean Earth's natural electromagnetic fields would affect their minds? Like constant noise, Nix explained. Unbearable chaos. But humans, her patterns shifted to something like admiration. Humans learned to tune it out. Your brains developed natural shields. The revelation spread through the room like a wave. Mrs. Patel was already scribbling equations, while Marcus pulled up medical studies about human electromagnetic sensitivity on his laptop. That's why they can't just control us like they did other species, Tom said slowly. Our brains are already hardened against interference. The meeting was interrupted by a rapid knock on the door. Billy burst in, out of breath from running. More people are coming, but I think they're here to help. He was right. Over the next few hours, vehicles arrived from across the state, then from neighboring states, amateur radio operators who had picked up strange signals, military veterans who recognized that the government agents weren't acting right, university students who had been tracking unusual satellite data. A network was forming, spreading information through secure channels. Someone had created an encrypted messaging app specifically for coordinating their efforts. Others brought equipment, supplies, and most importantly, knowledge. Look at this, a young computer scientist said, showing them data on her laptop. The hegemony ships are causing subtle disruptions in Earth's magnetic field. But these disruptions follow patterns. We might be able to predict their movements. Nix watched all this with growing amazement. Your people, they come together so quickly. No orders, no central command, just people helping people, Sarah finished. It's what we do best. But not everyone was friendly. As their network grew, so did the risk of discovery. The hegemony had started monitoring internet traffic, phone calls, even postal deliveries. They had infiltrators everywhere. That's when the truckers got involved. CB Radio, explained Big Mike, a veteran trucker with 30 years on the road. Old school. Hard to monitor if you don't know what to listen for. We can pass messages across the country without touching the internet. They developed a code system based on regular trucker talk. Weather reports carried information about hegemony movements. Road conditions meant security status. Traffic updates translated to safe routes for people and supplies. The library basement grew crowded with experts of all kinds. A geologist helped them map underground routes through cave systems. A meteorologist showed them how to use weather patterns to mask their movements. Even a group of local teenagers contributed by creating social media distractions to confuse hegemony surveillance. We found something else, Dr. Watson announced late one night. The electromagnetic fields aren't just defensive. When focused correctly, they could potentially disrupt hegemony technology completely. Nexus patterns flashed with excitement. Yes, this is why they work through human agents so much. Their own forms are sensitive to these energies. Sarah looked at the growing collection of minds and talents around her. What had started as one person helping an injured alien had grown into something much bigger. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were preparing to fight back. We're not hiding anymore, she declared. It's time to show them exactly what humans can do when we work together. The room hummed with determined energy. The hegemony thought they were hunting a single alien fugitive. Instead, they had awakened a global network of human ingenuity and cooperation. And that network was about to strike back. The moment the hegemony ships started moving into attack formation above Pine Creek, Sarah knew their time for preparation was over. Through the library's basement window, she could see their dark shapes blotting out the stars, their hulls shimming with strange energies. They're done pretending, she announced to the room full of resistance members. They know we've been helping Nix. The alien refugee's skin patterns pulsed with worried colors as she worked with Dr. Watson on a complex device. It was a combination of her translator technology and human radio equipment, modified to broadcast on frequencies that could reach most of Earth's communications networks. The device is ready, Nix said. But to reach enough humans, we need more power. Much more. That's when Billy, who had been quiet all morning, spoke up again. What about the dam? All eyes turned to him. The hydroelectric dam outside town. It powers half the state. Mrs. Patel's eyes lit up. The boy's right. and the electromagnetic field from all that generating equipment could help amplify our signal. They had less than an hour to move their equipment to the dam. The hegemony forces were mobilizing on the ground, abandoning their human disguises. Their true forms were tall, almost mechanical in their movements, with skin that reflected light like polished metal. Sarah coordinated the operation from the dam's control room. Local power company workers, now part of their network, helped set up the broadcasting equipment. Dr. Watson and Mrs. Patel made final adjustments while Marcus organized teams to defend the facility. "We've got movement on the access road." Tom's voice crackled over the radio. "At least 20 of them, not even trying to look human anymore." Nix worked frantically on the device, her patterns shifting with concentration. The broadcast must show everyone the truth, not just about the invasion, but about humanity's strength. The first attacks came just as they powered up the equipment. The hegemony forces hit hard, using weapons that fired pulses of energy designed to overload electronic systems. But they hadn't counted on the dam's old, sturdy construction. They relied too much on high-tech solutions, Sarah observed as another energy blast dissipated harmlessly against the thick concrete walls. They don't understand simple engineering. The defenders had their own surprises ready. The local hunting clubs had set up positions in the surrounding hills. Their regular rifles wouldn't do much against the aliens' armor, but the shots kept the hegemony forces diving for cover, disrupting their coordinated movements. Inside the control room, Nix suddenly straightened. "It's ready. The broadcast will override most electronic communications on your planet. Everyone needs to see this." She activated her device, and the air filled with holograms. They showed everything. The hegemony's true form, their ships, their plans for Earth. But more importantly, they showed how humans had resisted, not with advanced technology, but with courage, cooperation, and creativity. "People need to understand what they're facing," Sarah said, watching the images flow. "But they also need to see that we can fight back." The hegemony forces outside suddenly pulled back. Their ships above the town began charging weapons, preparing to simply destroy the dam rather than let the broadcast continue. That's when humanity's preparation paid off. At points across the country, equipment hastily assembled by their network began generating focused electromagnetic pulses, tuned to the exact frequency Dr. Watson had discovered. The alien ship's energy weapons flickered and failed. "Your ships," Nix explained through the broadcast, her patterns bright with triumph. "They cannot function properly in Earth's magnetic field when it's amplified like this. You never understood the true power of this world." The broadcast reached everywhere: phones, computers, televisions, radio. Millions watched as the mighty hegemony ships hung helpless in the sky, disabled by Earth's natural defenses, enhanced by human ingenuity. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony wouldn't give up easily. They would adapt, try new tactics, yet looking at how quickly humans had come together, how effectively they had fought back, she felt confident. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity was ready. The morning after the broadcast, Pine Creek became the center of the world's attention. Military vehicles rumbled through the streets as news helicopters circled overhead. But the real action was happening in orbit, where the hegemony's massive mothership had just arrived. "They're not retreating," Sarah said, watching satellite footage in the dam's control room. "They're calling in everything they have." Nix's patterns had turned a deep, worried blue. "The commander himself comes. He will not accept defeat." Her translator crackled as she added, "He never has, on any world." The room was packed with an unlikely mix of allies: military officers studying tactical displays, scientists monitoring electromagnetic readings, and local volunteers maintaining communication networks. They had shown the world the truth, but now they had to survive what came next. Dr. Watson burst in with new data. "The mothership is different. It's shielded against electromagnetic interference. Our previous tactics won't work." As if to prove his point, the sky turned an ominous purple as the massive ship began atmospheric entry. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, shaped like a giant arrowhead pointing at Earth. "They'll target this facility first," Tom said grimly. "We hurt their pride. They'll want revenge before they start their main invasion." Sarah looked at their assembled forces: local police, military units, civilian volunteers, all preparing for what seemed like an impossible battle. But they had one advantage the hegemony couldn't understand. They were fighting for their home. The attack began at noon. Dropships fell from the sky like metallic rain, deploying hundreds of hegemony troops. Their weapons were more powerful now, designed to work despite Earth's magnetic field. "Fall back to defensive positions," Sarah ordered through the radio network. The human forces had prepared the terrain well. The surrounding hills were filled with trenches, bunkers, and carefully planned escape routes. The dam itself had been transformed. Local construction workers had reinforced weak points, while engineers had rigged the spillways to create instant floods if needed. Every advantage of the landscape was put to use. The first wave of aliens hit the outer defenses hard. Energy weapons lit up the sky, but the defenders held firm. Years of hunting in these hills had taught the locals every hiding spot, every natural choke point. "They're still thinking like conquerors," Marcus observed as another alien assault faltered. "They expect us to fight like their other victims, trying to match their technology. They don't understand guerrilla warfare." But the hegemony had numbers on their side. Slowly, steadily, they pushed toward the dam. The human casualties mounted. Sarah knew they couldn't hold out much longer. That's when Nyx made her decision. "The mothership's reactor," she said suddenly, her patterns flashing with determination. "It has a flaw. All their ships do. But to exploit it..." She paused. "Someone must get aboard." Sarah understood immediately. A suicide mission. No. Nyx's patterns shifted to colors Sarah had never seen before. "A sacrifice worth making. My people have been their slaves for too long. Let me end this." Before anyone could argue, alarms blared. The mothership was powering up its main weapon, a cannon designed to crack the planet's crust. "If they can't have Earth's secrets," Nyx explained, "they will destroy them." What happened next was pure chaos. Sarah coordinated a massive distraction, with all human forces attacking simultaneously. Under the cover of battle, Nyx used her knowledge of hegemony systems to hijack one of their dropships. As she prepared to leave, she turned to Sarah one last time. "Your people showed me something I never knew existed. Freedom worth fighting for." Sarah watched as the stolen ship rose toward the mothership. Through their radio link, she could hear Nyx transmitting one final message to her captive people aboard the hegemony ships. "Watch how brave one can be when fighting alongside humans." The dam's defenders cheered as the mothership's lights began to flicker. But their victory celebration was about to be interrupted by something none of them expected, not even Nyx. As Nyx's stolen ship approached the mothership, something extraordinary happened. The massive vessel's lights began changing color, not failing as they had expected, but shifting to brilliant patterns that Sarah recognized. They were the same patterns Nyx used to communicate strong emotions. "Look," Dr. Watson pointed at his instruments. "Other ships, they're responding." Across the sky, hegemony vessels started displaying similar patterns. Through their radio network, they could hear confused reports from around the world. Alien ships everywhere were showing the same synchronized light display. "It's a rebellion," Marcus breathed. "The other auxiliary aboard those ships. They're answering Nyx's call." The truth hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. Every hegemony ship carried auxiliary crew members, used for their natural ability to interface with crystalline technology. Now, inspired by Nyx's actions and humanity's resistance, they were rising up together. The mothership's weapon powered down as internal chaos erupted. Through scattered communications, they learned that auxiliary crew members across the fleet were seizing control of critical systems. The hegemony commanders, for the first time in their history, faced resistance from within their own ships. But the commander of the mothership wasn't going to surrender easily. His personal guard launched a desperate counterattack, trying to regain control. The battle in orbit was reflected by lights dancing across the sky like an alien aurora. "We have to help them," Sarah decided. She turned to Dr. Watson and Mrs. Pottle. "Can we use the dam's power to boost their control over the ship's systems?" The scientists jumped into action, redirecting their electromagnetic broadcast equipment. Instead of jamming the ships, they would amplify the auxiliary control signals. Local power stations across the country, still part of their network, joined in the effort. The commander made one final desperate move. Unable to fire the main weapon, he ordered the mothership to begin a suicide dive toward the dam. If he couldn't have Earth, he would at least destroy those who had defied him. That's when Nyx revealed her last secret. Her voice came through all their communication systems, but different now. Clear, strong, royal. "I am not just any rebel. I am the first daughter of the Auxiliary High Council, and I reclaim our people's freedom." The patterns across the mothership blazed with blinding intensity. Every auxiliary crew member, inspired by their princess's example, seized complete control of their ship's systems. The mothership's descent halted, then slowly reversed. On the ground, the remaining hegemony troops found themselves cut off as their equipment, all dependent on auxiliary technology, stopped responding. The battle was over almost anticlimactically, with the once mighty invaders surrendering to local police and militia. Hours later, Sarah stood with Nyx, now Princess Nyx, watching the sunrise over Pine Creek. The alien ships still hung in the sky, but their patterns now pulsed with friendly colors. "You could have told us you were a princess," Sarah said with a smile. Nyx's patterns showed amusement. "I had to know if humans would help anyone in need, not just someone important. You proved better than I hoped." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The auxiliary, free from hegemony control, established diplomatic relations with Earth. Their crystalline technology, combined with human innovation, opened new possibilities for both species. More importantly, word spread through the galaxy. The story of how a small town in Montana had helped spark a revolution became legend. Other enslaved species, inspired by humanity's example, began their own rebellions against the crumbling hegemony. 1 year later, Sarah sat in her ranch's porch, drinking coffee with Nyx, who now served as the auxiliary ambassador to Earth. The hills around them were dotted with mixed communities of humans and aliens, learning from each other. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said, watching a group of local kids playing with young auxiliary. "We didn't win because we were stronger or had better weapons. We won because we showed the galaxy something more powerful." Nyx's patterns glowed with warm agreement. "Yes, you showed them that true strength comes from helping others, from standing together. You taught us all how to be free." Above them, Earth's magnetic field shimmered with its ancient power, no longer a barrier between species, but a reminder of how humanity's unique evolution had helped change the course of galactic history.